Thank you, everyone. We'll start our presentation today. Good morning, everyone. My name is Solimar Salas. I am the Vice President of Content, Innovation, and Audiences at the Museum of Latin American Art. We welcome you today, Wednesday, September 25th of 2024, to this edition of MOLAA Zoom Project. We have a conversation today with Constanza Piña. Our Chief of Curatorship, Gabriela Urtiaga, will talk to the artist about her work. Today, we are going to see one of the artists of the show Arteônica, Art, Science, and Technology in Latin America that is here at MOLA in September of 2024. We'd like to thank the Foundation Earl B. Miller, Getty Foundation, California Humanities, Art Council of Long Beach, and in particular, California Arts Council for their support to the educational programming of the museum. For the audience, we will have live interpreting. Every participant should select their preferred language on the bottom right part of the screen using the globe and then select your language. We will have our session in Spanish and the interpreting will be in English today. For your enjoyment, in each chapter, the conversation between artists and our chief of curators is focused in a work or a series of works that require a detailed inspection and a process of contemplation and exploration to go deep into the ideas that surround the creation of these works, as well as their sources of inspiration. In this chapter of MOLAA Zoom Project, we will interview the artist Constanza Piña. She was born in Curicó, Chile in 1984. She's an artist, researcher, and educator. She's focused on electronic and sound experimentation, open source technologies, DIY philosophy, and techno feminist social practices. Her work explores noise as a phenomenon that encompasses sound, social, cultural, political, and spiritual dimensions. Her practice blends contemporary technologies with ancient techniques through speculative narratives. She creates analog synthesizers, textile antennas, and EMF experimental amplifiers. From a pseudoscientific perspective, Constanza develops the concept of electronic witchcraft, seeing electronics as a bridge to connect the physical world with intangible energy from multiple spectral fields. Her work includes installations, performances, concerts, as well as collaborations, workshops, event organization, and the creation of archives. Since 2013, she has been researching pre-Hispanic ancestral computing systems materialized in the piece Kipu, Pre-Hispanic Electrotextile Computer, awarded at Ars Electronica Pre-2020. This research fuses speculation and Andean science fiction to vindicate ancestral knowledge underrated by hegemonic scientific sources. Active in the underground experimental music scene since 2010 under the pseudonym Corazón de Robota, using only DIY synthesizers that she creates and builds herself, she explores the field of audible and inaudible frequencies, psychophysical perceptions of sound, and the rhythmic dimensions of noise. Founder of the techno-feminist meeting Cyborg Girls Mexico in Mexico City from 2017, Constanza contributes to the creation of non-institutional spaces based on mutual care, collective pleasure, and technological subversion. She currently works as an independent artist and teaches at her project school, Non-Binary Electronic Berlin in Germany. If you are just logging onto the session, we have interpreting available. All the participants, please select your preferred language on the bottom part of the screen using the icon of the globe. Constanza, it's a pleasure to have you here at MOLA and to have you be part of this project Arteônica, where we are presenting the intersection between art, science, and technology. And you are one of the artists that's here with us. It's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much, Gabriela. So the idea is to be able to share with the audience your beginning as an artist and to have you share your interests, your questions, and from that narration, then tell us about your body of work. What's your philosophy? How do you operate in a political and philosophical point of view? And also in your artistic practice with the kind of work that you do, you find through your work a way to express and share knowledge. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very proud of being part of this show. Well, I started my journey in art through visual art and contemporary dance. That's my formation. And through there, I started going towards sound, especially I started working with noise. That's my main focus currently, noise and electronic art. And within my journey with dance, I started working a lot with textiles because I was very interested in the interaction between the body and technology. And for that, I started designing machines and devices that could adapt to the shape of the human body to create some kind of interaction. And that was where I started to discover the world of electro textiles. It's been more than 12 years since I did that. And we didn't have back then different materials like we have today, like conductive wire. It was that would allow for a more professional work. My work was very experimental back then. I started working with very artisanal techniques and with different household materials. And that's how I developed my first pieces that have more, that are related to the wearables, the technology that you can wear. A lot of that was linked to sound and dance. My first pieces, I was working with dancers and performers, and that's where, in this journey with experimental sound, I started to develop my own devices to play and perform. I made a whole set of handmade synthesizers with which I perform in concert currently as Corazón de Robota. That is the realm of sound. And this whole research during this research, I work with a lot of digital electronics, and in the trip that I made, I found a book called Science of the Inca Kipu Binary Coding. And that was the first time that I discovered that we had this system. It's an ancestral system, mainly from South America, used by the pre-Columbian cultures that would knot the information along ropes. They would code this in knots, and these knots had to do with binary code. So for me, it was a whole discovery to know that digital technology had a textile background in my continent and in the ancestral cultures of South America. And that was more or less around 2013. I started this research doing a lot of parallel work. Back then, when I found this book, I was in Germany. And looking up things online there wasn't a lot of information, and that's when I found that there was a museum in Berlin, the Ethnological Museum, where they have the largest collection of quipus in the world. So the quipus are not in their original territories to be studied; they are abroad, most of them. So back then, I visited the museum. And then I set off on a trip through South America, where I visited different quipus in Chile, in the Museum of Pre-Columbian Art in Cusco, Lima, in Ecuador. And there are not a lot of pieces available to the public. So I started getting deeper and deeper into this research to start developing a workshop or a laboratory 2 years after that, where I shared this research. I gathered books and images and interviews, and this research I socialized it with a group of women, and I proposed the development of this piece, and we started working on that. The main idea of this research was that on the one hand, we have the idea of digitalizing comes from the word digit, which means finger. So our ancestors already noted the information and coded it using simply their fingers and the brain as a processing interface. So within this lab or workshop, we learned how to code using our fingers and the wool as the material. On the other hand, within this same laboratory, we had the idea of creating this installation, so we had to create a code to do what we wanted to express in this piece. So within the research, we read that in order to be able to really understand a quipu, you have to make a quipu. So we said, let's make one. It's not enough with practicing. We have to make one. We have to make up our own code and to work on this. So we started with the fictional idea of what would have happened if the colonizers hadn't arrived in Latin America and these technologies still existed today. How would they be today? So that's where I felt like everything came together. Um, On the one hand, we integrated the electrotextile work using conductive materials. In this case, we mixed the alpaca wool with copper wire. And so out of the ropes, we created a conductive material. On the other hand, by making these ropes a conductive material, we were able to integrate them to an electronic circuit. And the idea was to make an antenna out of these ropes and connect them to an amplifier. And that way we were able to listen to what the ropes were capturing. And that's where we started mixing that with other kinds of readings where it says that the word kipo means nuts. Kipo means not, but it means a knot that speaks because these knots have a code. They have an information that tells stories of an ancient civilization who are our ancestors of Latin America. And that's very powerful. What you're saying is very powerful. And I would like you to tell us a little bit more about that work in collaboration. That exists within your work. You open up the knowledge, but you also receive knowledge from other people. In your work, you also give visibility to this group of women. So how does this happen? How do these talks all get transmitted after in the piece through the vibration and the sound? Well, I work with a group of different people comes from years back when I was telling you that I started working with electronic art and dance and music. Back then, I had started doing these open workshops of electronic, experimental electronic. For many years, I had a blog. I actually still have that blog. It's called Corazón de Robota. That's still exists online, where I practice everything that's the open hardware. So all my research is there. There's forums. There are schematics to share that information. And in this case, my intention was that almost everything that I studied about electronics was through the internet, and most of that information is in English. And back then, when I was living in South America, I felt the need to translate all of that into Spanish in this case, and to share it through different networks. And then we started getting a lot of followers and people that started to create a sense of community online. And that online community, I put it into practice in the different workshops or laboratories of experimental electronics and experimental textiles in different ages, in labs or workshops for families, for children, for the public in general. And I think that the more specific work with women started happening through the years because a lot of girls arrived into my workshop saying for it's been many years that I've wanted to learn about electronics, but then I found that there was a teacher that was a woman. That's what got me into doing it. Plus, when we integrate textiles, we are creating a sense of familiarity because even if we do not want to acknowledge that technologies have gender, or if we think they're neutral, they are not. There is a ideology of gender behind different technologies. So for me, that's when we started to find this techno feminism. And that's been my statement up to today. Since 2017, I am an organizer of the Techno Feminist Encounter in Mexico City, which gathers a lot of women of all ages, and it includes all kinds of practices, whether they are crafts or traditional practices, ancestral technologies, software, hardware. It's a wide variety of technology, of feminine and feminist technologies, because for us, it's very important to place this political vision, especially within the context of Latin America and Mexico, where the situation for women is very uneven. So on one hand, we had this intention of putting this philosophy into practice with the artisanal electronics. And within the work of Kipu, through the years, we started to see there were girls that wanted to take this workshop and participated. And the women that participated in the techno feminist encounter, they were all creating this community. So when I decided to do this workshop, all we got were women. You know, that was great because that was also a way of saying, well, let's study this technology, this ancestral technology from pre-Hispanic times in a workshop that was international. We had women from Latin America in general. So it was very close because of the material, because of the concept of the research. And the workshop, the laboratory embodied all of this philosophy, and it embodied us, to put it simply. And what we wanted to do with this piece was to find a way to integrate carefully these technologies that have been kidnapped by colonization and bringing them to today, respecting their original meaning, but also updating them. Given that these technologies were burned, they were forbidden. Um, Today, we cannot decipher the code of Kipu. So we wanted to have that manual experience working days and months as a group to be able to channel all of this information that we were studying in the making of this. And part of the research got us into thinking how we could place these ancient computing systems within the current computing systems. So we started studying also the history of the computing systems of today, and they have their origins in the looms. So we started to see that the current computer is not completely separated from the textile work. On the other hand, we also found that the first person to program, the first person to ever code in the world was a woman, Ada Lovelace. So that was, we started telling a different story. We said, let's tell the story of computing from the perspective point of view. Let's integrate all the women that were milestones in this history and then have participated in the history of computing, integrating the textile work, the ancestral technologies, and the knowledge, situated knowledge. So for me, the experience of these workshops or laboratories in general is, like you were saying, is receiving a lot of information and learning a lot, learning how to coexist and For me, teaching electronics or teaching about textiles more than the practice, it has to do with how we generate this community in the work, how we learn to get to know each other. Everything you're saying is very interesting, Constanza, and you are a very present artist in your time in all the different situations that we live, but also you have a very deep look into the past. I think that you have a very rich knowledge that you've gotten through this link with other people, but also this idea that you're always in movement, traveling, getting to know other cultures. How does that, now that you live in Berlin as a South American woman, what do you find this new area in what you are contributing to the narrative of this South American art? What does electronic art give to you to continue to generate this sense of community and experience and the richness that you can share? Well, like I was telling you previously, electronic art has been a way to get to know people in a new country, for example, because I go to a new city, I start a workshop, and I know that all the people that are going to get there are the ones that I'm interested to get to know. Musicians, artists, dancers, DJs, a lot of people that are within this research fields, we're going to get to know each other there. So I'm not just going to get to know them. We are all going to weave this network. That's important. And also, I can get to know the city because a lot of the time when I'm searching for materials for electronics or to create a piece or to do the workshops, I you start opening up the field when you have something related to the social aspect as well. So I'm very interested in creating workshops wherever I go. Currently, I've been living in Berlin for a year, and my main interest was being there so that I could have access to the largest collection of quipus in the world. So I have access to the museum archive. I can do research with them closely. Another interest that I had in Germany was electronic music. For me, well, noise has been my field of research for a very long time now, and it's been through noise that's like the common thread, a conceptual common thread that's joined all my pieces. And noise for me is not just a physical phenomenon, it's also a social phenomenon and a spiritual one. The fact of getting together to do an experimental electronic workshop means that we're not just making noise, we are noise. So, like I said, it's been through the ideology, the techno-feminist ideology. It's been like in Germany right now, I'm starting a school called non-binary electronics with the idea of based on the binary system. When you study that, it's not just the computers that are based in the binary system. The entire society is based in a binary system, and therefore computers are like that. They're a manifestation of thought. Exactly. So within non-binary electronics, we're trying to see how to integrate noise. When you think about system theory, noise is everything that's outside of the binary system. The binary system is one and zeros. It's when you have an unsteady signal, it's not captured and it's discriminated, and it's called the negligible factor. That's what happens not just in systems, but in the society. The thing that is weird or queer that makes noise is different. It's what's non-binary. So conceptually, thinking about all different ideas, where I'm starting this project and this school, we're integrating techno-feminist practices with electronics and noise, but we're open as well to other kinds of teachers of other areas. And I think that's how I'm starting to open a wider niche within the Latin American communities, because there's people that know me already. They see that I'm there and I do these workshops in English and in Spanish. So that's what I propose. It's hard sometimes for the Latin American communities to have a workshop in Spanish or that are bilingual, because we're in Germany. Maybe it should be in German, you know? So this opportunity of this school is also to create community with the participants that are Latin American. This is wonderful because one of the things that we found in the study many years ago in this exhibit of Arteônica is that artists, no matter how much they're moving, and even if they are in a completely different context, different to their origin, they're always working within that area that where they were born. So we would like you to share with us what's the audience's reaction when they find your work. It could be with this piece, the Kipu, but maybe also with other pieces that you were developing. How do people react? And do you think in are you thinking about the diverse audience that are going to run into your work or find your work, or do you not think a lot about the people that are going to get to know you? Um, because this is also a way for you to consolidate yourself as an artist and a thinker of a time that is very complex, of these times where we need dialogue and we need noise, but we also need silence, we need emptiness. So how do you navigate these different scenarios, thinking that you have the opportunity to show in museums and that there are a lot of people that will approach to get to know you and to experiment with your pieces? Well, a lot of the times the pieces that I present and are accompanied by a workshop, like in this case, we started with a workshop, and a lot of the times when I present a piece, I give a talk, or there's a book alongside the piece. It has a website where you have all the information there, and there's a lot of theses, students that are starting their research on Kipus, and I am very happy to reply. In terms of this piece, it's mostly been presented indoors in museums, but there are parallel activities that allow for its socialization. I also have other pieces that are more thought for public spaces, but mostly for me, a way of interacting with the public in general is that I do these workshops of electronics in on the street. In Berlin in the summer, sometimes if I'm working in a room, I think let's go outside. So we take an extension cord and we take part of a street with no permission or authorization, and people that are walking by come close, they ask. Grandparents, for example, that have a lot of knowledge, but maybe they are not updated because of the digital world. They all of a sudden see this analogic world in their neighborhood, and then they start asking me, when will you have another one so that I can bring my children? I also do a lot of workshops for children. I'm always concerned about reaching the public in general. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I get to a city, I think, well, there's a certain community there. Well, then let's say there are cyclists here. Let's do something for their jackets so that they can be lit up at night. Or if there's another city where there's like a community of sketchers, let's do something that has to do with that and sound. So I try to adapt and learn. These workshops are an exchange as well. That's why for me they're more like labs than workshops, because that way I feel like the active participation is more integrated from the people that attend. Thank you so much, Constanza. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge. Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you, everybody, for staying with us throughout this event. Gracias por estar con nosotros durante la presentación de Constanza. Los invito a que si están en el área de Los Ángeles, Long Beach o áreas cercanas, vengan y visiten la exhibición y ahí pueden ver la obra de Constanza en vivo y tener esa experiencia participativa. Tenemos una pregunta en la sección de preguntas y respuestas. Estaremos compartiendo esto con la artista y ya nos comunicaremos con usted. Gracias a todos y que tengan un excelente día.